Grandma? Did you get the Thanksgiving gift I sent?
Not yet. I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. I picked it out myself. I'm sure you'll love it, Grandma.
My granddaughter Natalie said this with a voice full of excitement. It seemed that Natalie had thoughtfully picked out something special to delight me. After ending the video call with Natalie, a delivery arrived about 10 minutes later.
I have a package for you.
I was puzzled by the unexpected lightness of the package and tilted my head in confusion. Just to be sure, I checked the sender's information, and it was indeed from my eldest son, Matthew, with the correct address.
What's this about?
I murmured with a furrowed brow, and the delivery person looked worried.
Is there something?
Oh, no. Sorry, I was talking to myself. Matthew works for a top trading company and has always sent us Thanksgiving gifts every year, but this was the first time the package was so light. After bringing the package inside, I opened the box.
What is this?
I couldn't believe my eyes. Inside the box was just one dirty, used towel. Beneath it was a cute envelope decorated with anime characters. Opening the envelope, I found a note with messy, hard-to-read handwriting which said, "Grandma, thank you for everything." In the corner of the letter was written Natalie.
Is this it?
The utterly unexpected content of the gift left me bewildered and confused. My name is Kara, a 65-year-old housewife. I got married in my 20s and gave birth to my eldest son, Matthew. Later, we had a second son, and I was blessed with a smooth-sailing family life. Both boys were energetic, but never got into trouble and grew up to be kind and honest individuals. Someday when we grow up, we'll definitely repay Mom and Dad for everything.
You boys really are such good kids, not causing any trouble.
After finishing their education, each of the kids went on to start their independent lives in society. A few years ago, Matthew got married, and the following year, they welcomed a girl named Natalie.
Natalie is so adorable. She truly is the apple of my eye.
Natalie was our first grandchild, and both my husband and I doted on her immensely. Matthew, while sometimes bemused by our adoration, never failed to keep us updated over the phone.
Natalie can write her own name now.
Is that so? Kids grow up so fast, don't they? However, Victoria, my daughter-in-law, seemed to dislike us for some reason. Kara, please don't spoil Natalie too much. She's our child, and we don't want her to get the wrong education from others.
But Natalie is our granddaughter and part of our family. What's wrong with that?
If Natalie becomes too attached to you and stops listening to me, her mom, it could interfere with her upbringing. That would be problematic. Please don't get too involved from now on.
Even if you say that. We don't see her every day. I think it's fine to spoil our granddaughter a bit when we do see her. Is that also not allowed?
No, it's not. This is our approach to raising her. Faced with such a statement, I had no choice but to refrain from arguing further. As Natalie's birthday approached, I thought to myself,
it's almost Natalie's birthday. I wonder what she would like as a present.
I called Victoria, excited at the thought. Victoria responded in a flat tone. That's all right. We don't want the house to be cluttered with too many things. We were also not informed in advance about Natalie's nursery school sports day. I wish you had told us earlier about the sports day. We would have loved to go and cheer for Natalie. When I protested, Victoria scoffed. I thought it would be more of a bother to inform people who are far away. This kind of situation repeated itself several times. Sometimes, Matthew would send us photos of the family. One Christmas, there were pictures of Natalie happily decorating with Victoria's parents, and during a summer vacation, there were photos of Natalie in a swimsuit, holding hands with Victoria's parents by the lake. It seemed that Victoria's parents were experiencing all the things we wished to do but couldn't. Each time we learned about these events, we felt an indescribable loneliness, as if we were being excluded by Matthew's family. Years later, after a long life together, my husband passed away. Now I'm truly all alone. My loneliness only deepened from then on. Even so, there was one thing that gave me solace. I taught Natalie how to make video calls. From now on, we'll try to have Natalie call you Mom as much as possible. Matthew said this, concerned about my loneliness.
Grandma, how are you? I can swim a little bit in the pool now. Is that so? That's great, Natalie. And recently, my dad took me to the amusement park. That's wonderful, Natalie. Next time, Grandma will take you somewhere fun. Is there anywhere you'd like to go?
I wanted to chat with Natalie for hours, but if the call got too long, Victoria would become angry.
Kara, how long are you going to keep talking? It's really bothersome.
Victoria, looking like a demon, would appear behind Natalie and forcefully end the call. Still, Natalie would sneakily make video calls to me when Victoria was out shopping, which made me very happy. One day, when video calls with Natalie had become a part of my daily routine. Kara, please help me. Suddenly, I received a call from Victoria, crying and asking for my help. I was shocked by the suddenness of it all.
Victoria? What's wrong?
Victoria, with a trembling voice but clear enough for me to hear, said, "Actually, we're having financial troubles."
Financial troubles? What do you mean?
Matthew works for one of the top trading companies in the country. And Victoria works as well, so under normal circumstances, it would be unlikely for them to face financial difficulties. Victoria took a deep breath and explained, "Actually, Matthew's income has significantly decreased for the past few months."
What? His income decreased? Did he get involved in some kind of scandal at work?
It's not that. It seems the company itself is in a precarious situation, and as a result, Matthew's income has been reduced.
I see. That's tough.
Yes, it is. At first, we were managing with my salary, but now it looks like Matthew's income will decrease even further.
Are you guys managing all right?
We're barely getting by. And Natalie will be starting elementary school next year. At this rate, we won't even be able to buy her a backpack.
Poor Natalie.
That's why I have a favor to ask of you, Kara. You need money, right? I understand. How much should I transfer? I'm sorry to ask this, Kara. Could you lend me about $200? I'll pay you back as soon as possible. You can pay me back whenever. Seeing Natalie happy is more than enough joy for me. After hanging up, I rushed to the bank and transferred $200. Thank you so much, Kara. I really appreciate it. Please forgive my past rudeness. Victoria repeated her thanks, with tears in her eyes. It's all right. Don't cry, Victoria.
Also, please keep this a secret from Matthew. He would be hurt if he knew I turned to you for help. He's already down because his salary was reduced.
Understood. I think that's for the best too. Thank you, Victoria. Victoria's attitude, considering Matthew's feelings despite their difficult situation, warmed my heart. Even as I continued to enjoy regular video calls with Matthew and Natalie, I kept my promise to Victoria and avoided any mention of financial matters. About half a month later, Victoria called again. I'm sorry to bother you again, Kara. But we desperately need money again. Natalie's textbooks and reference books are surprisingly expensive. Understood. Don't worry, you can always rely on me. Could you please lend us about $500? All right. $500, then? Another half-month passed. I'm sorry to ask again, Kara. This time, the clothes I want to buy for Natalie are so expensive. I'm worried she might be teased by her friends if she only has cheap, second-hand clothes. I understand how you feel. So, how much do you need this time? Well, if you could transfer about $1,000, that would really help.
$1,000. That's quite a lot, isn't it?
While wondering if children's clothes could really cost that much, I told myself, it's all for Natalie's sake. And so, I transferred the requested $1,000. However, feeling uneasy about the increasing amounts being asked for, I subtly asked Matthew. It's all good. There's nothing for you to worry about, Mom. I'll be getting a bonus soon anyway.
Is that so? You're not overextending, are you?
Matthew laughed it off. My company is a top trading firm. We can certainly afford what's needed for our child's school entry. Seeing Matthew act like that only increased my worries.
That child. Maybe he's just putting on a brave face, not wanting to worry his mother.
The requests for money from Victoria continued after that. Then one day, during a video call, Matthew said, Mom, I sent a Thanksgiving gift your way, so it should arrive sometime today. Hearing Matthew's usual lively voice made me feel somewhat conflicted.
Thank you, as always. But are you sure it's all right?
Matthew laughed heartily. It's a yearly tradition, isn't it? What's with the formalities all of a sudden? You've been acting strange lately, Mom.
Well, it's just that prices seem to be going up recently.
Sure, prices have gone up, but it's not like I'm struggling to the point where I can't send gifts to Mom. You don't need to worry about that.
If you say so. I just hope it's really all right.
As long as I could see Matthew's face, he didn't seem to be in serious trouble, but he might just be putting on a brave face for my sake.
Natalie just got home. Let her take over, it's a special occasion.
Then, Natalie's smiling face filled the monitor. Grandma? Did you get the gift?
Not yet. I'm looking forward to it. I picked it out myself. I'm sure you'll love it, Grandma.
Hearing Natalie's cheerful and adorable voice, the uneasy feelings in my heart were instantly swept away.
Seeing your smile makes me so happy. Thank you always. I love you so much, Grandma.
After the video call with Natalie ended, about 10 minutes later, the delivery arrived. Expecting a hefty package, I watched the delivery person approach, but they moved surprisingly lightly. I have a delivery for you.
You must be quite strong.
I laughed, impressed, but the delivery person looked surprised.
Oh, no, not at all. Could you please sign here?
Receiving the package, I tilted my head in confusion. True to the delivery person's words, the package was light. Just to be sure, I checked the sender's information, and there was no mistake. It was indeed Matthew's name and address.
What's this about?
I murmured with a furrowed brow, and the delivery person looked worried.
Is there something?
Oh, no. Sorry, it's just me talking to myself. I laughed it off, and the delivery person felt relieved.
Thank you very much,
the delivery person said before heading back to the truck. I brought the light package inside and opened it.
What is this?
Inside the box was just one dirty, used towel. Beneath it was a cute envelope decorated with anime characters. Opening the envelope, I found a note with messy, hard-to-read handwriting that said, "Grandma, thank you for everything." In the corner of the letter was written Natalie.
Is this it?
It was abnormal to send just a worn-out towel, especially if they were struggling with money. If that was the intention, Matthew wouldn't have made a video call acting as usual. He must have been very confident about the package he sent. Also, the letter from Natalie felt off. I remembered Natalie showing me her name written neatly over a video call, which she had just learned, but this handwriting was barely legible.
Did Natalie really write this letter?
I immediately called Matthew's house.
Grandma? Did you get the package? Are you happy?
Natalie said in the same cheerful tone as before.
Thank you for the gift. Is your dad there by any chance?
Yes, he is.
Dad. Grandma is calling.
After a few seconds, Matthew came on the line.
So, you got the package. That's great.
I have something I need to ask you.
What's wrong? You sound so serious.
Matthew seemed completely clueless as to why my voice was filled with concern. Are you sure about the contents of the gift you sent me? Is that really all there was supposed to be?
What do you mean? Were you not satisfied? Or should we have chosen a different product?
There was no hint of evasion in Matthew's voice. I opened the package, and all that was inside was a worn-out towel and a letter from Natalie. Then, from the other end of the phone, Matthew said,
A worn-out towel? What do you mean by a worn-out towel?
But that's all that arrived here.
Could it be someone's prank? Are you sure the sender was me?
There's no mistake. I checked the sender's information over and over, and it was definitely from you.
That can't be right. What I sent was a boxed set of cooking oils. Natalie chooses it every year. That's what I sent this year too.
Is that so?
Absolutely. Why would I send my mom a worn-out towel? And Natalie didn't write a letter, she drew a portrait of you.
A portrait? By Natalie?
Yes. She worked hard on it, wanting to make her grandma happy. I saw her put it in the box myself, so there's no mistake.
Then how was the package sent?
I'm not sure. Victoria probably called the courier service to send it from our home.
Were you at home at that time?
I had to leave suddenly for work, so I don't know what happened after that. Maybe Victoria knows something.
Doubts about Victoria began to grow in my mind.
I have something I want to ask you.
I braced myself and asked the question I had been hesitant to ask until now.
Is it true that your salary at work has been reduced recently?
Mom? What are you talking about? That's not true at all. Matthew burst into laughter. It didn't seem like he was avoiding the question.
Far from being reduced, my salary actually increased because I was promoted to section chief. You were promoted? Is that true? Absolutely. Do you think I would lie to you, Mom? Who told you my salary was reduced? That's completely false.
So, the stories about your family struggling financially are entirely untrue? Can I believe that?
You're persistent. As I've said before, I was promoted to section chief, my salary is higher than before, and I'm more than capable of supporting my family.
I'm relieved to hear that. I felt relieved, and at the same time, my suspicion towards Victoria turned into conviction.
Then why would Victoria say such things?
What happened with Victoria? I revealed everything to Matthew without holding back, explaining how Victoria had been asking me for money, citing financial struggles. After hearing everything, Matthew, with a trembling voice, said,
Is that really true?
Everything is true. She told me your salary was cut, making life difficult, and that you couldn't afford to buy Natalie's backpack or textbooks. She kept asking me for money.
Don't respond to her demands anymore. I'll talk to her.
Matthew ended the call after that. However, days passed without any word from Matthew.
I wonder if he managed to talk things out with Victoria.
I waited anxiously for a report from Matthew. Then one day, I received a call from unexpected people. Kara? This is Hilda, Victoria's mother. It's been a while.
Hello. Yes, it's been since Matthew and Victoria's wedding. Long time no speak.
I responded with humility, thinking that after Matthew had a talk with Victoria, her mother was calling to apologize. But Hilda, far from being humble, seemed rather intimidating to me.
You're quite the terrible mother-in-law. What are you referring to? Playing dumb won't help. I've heard everything from Victoria. I really don't understand what you're talking about.
Hilda sighed deeply over the phone.
You've been exploiting your position as the mother-in-law to demand large sums of money from Victoria every month. Me demanding money from Victoria? That's a lie. I've done no such thing.
I hurriedly denied it. However, Hilda didn't listen to my rebuttal. Victoria has never lied to me. She must have been suffering in silence, unable to confide in anyone. She suddenly returned to our home 7 days ago and has been locked in her room ever since. Poor thing.
It's the other way around. I'm the one who's been asked for money. You still intend to hurt Victoria at this point? It can't be helped. I'll switch to Kenneth now.
It seemed he was right there next to her. Now, Victoria's father Kenneth came on the line.
It seems you're determined to make Victoria out to be the villain, but I trust Victoria. But what I'm saying is the truth. If you just ask my son, Matthew, he'll tell you. I can't trust that Matthew.
Kenneth lashed out with anger.
I've heard it from Victoria. Isn't Matthew involved with another woman despite having a family? And Victoria feels like she's being treated as nothing more than a housekeeper, not recognized as a wife, crying to us about it. That must be some misunderstanding. Matthew would never. It's true. Victoria never lies to us. So, it must be you and your side who are lying.
All right. I'll speak with Matthew and see what we can do moving forward based on that. He'll probably just deny everything. Kenneth scoffed.
No matter what excuses you and your son come up with, we're consulting with a top lawyer. We're having him come over next weekend. This is quite troubling.
The voice switched back to Hilda.
No matter how much you fuss or scream now, we'll proceed with the divorce. Of course, Victoria will have custody of Natalie. Please, don't decide this all on your own. Of course we will. After all the terrible things you've done to Victoria, we can't possibly let Natalie see you. We'll sever all ties with you for Natalie's future.
With that, Hilda unilaterally ended the call. Not being able to see Natalie. Without dwelling on the matter, I immediately called Matthew to tell him what Victoria's parents had said. Then Matthew said in a surprisingly calm tone,
Next weekend, huh? All right, I understand. I'll meet with Victoria's family at their house to discuss.
He answered calmly. The promised weekend arrived, and Matthew, Natalie, and I went to Victoria's family home. As we were ushered into the living room, Kenneth crossed his arms and glared at us.
Bold of you to show up so nonchalantly.
He sneered at us in a demeaning way. Victoria, trying to hide her face from her parents with her hand, gave me a look as if to say, serves you right.
It's been a while, Victoria.
I bit my lower lip, holding back my anger as I spoke.
Natalie, Grandma and the others are going to have an important talk now, so why don't you play in the next room? Okay. I understand.
After ensuring Natalie had moved to the next room, the lawyer hired by Victoria's parents began to speak. Shall we begin then? Suddenly, Hilda burst out. We cannot contain our anger towards you and your son for what you've done. Kara, taking advantage of her position as the mother-in-law, demanded a high monthly allowance from Victoria, not to mention being betrayed by her own son, Matthew. Hilda began to cry, and Kenneth gently stroked her shoulder.
We demand a heartfelt apology from Kara to Victoria, full repayment of the money taken from her, compensation for the distress, and from Matthew, compensation for the hurt caused by his infidelity, a divorce from Victoria, and child support for Natalie.
I couldn't just accept their demands and immediately attempted to counter.
Everything you've said is baseless. Therefore, we cannot comply with any of your demands. Then show us the proof,
Hilda said with a triumphant smile. I took out the account transaction history from my bag. Here's your proof.
Contrary to the claim that I demanded money from Victoria, it was actually me who sent money to her. You can see for yourself in this transaction history.
The lawyer whispered with Victoria's parents.
What about the affair Matthew is accused of?
Matthew shook his head. I completely deny any affair, but unfortunately, there's no way to prove that. Victoria smirked at this. But then, Matthew smirked back.
However, I do have ample evidence of Victoria's affair.
His voice was filled with confidence, and Victoria and her parents looked shocked.
This is the transaction history from the account managing our family's finances,
Matthew prefaced. As you can see here. Every month from my mom to Victoria.
And then the same amount of money from Victoria to an unknown man's account. Indeed, the amounts match exactly.
The lawyer nodded. Then Victoria said in a panic.
This must be some fabrication you and Kara cooked up together.
She cried out exaggeratedly. But seeing no tears fall as she bowed her head, I immediately knew it was fake crying. Matthew continued. A few days ago, I hired a private investigator to look into Victoria's activities. And recently, I received their report. Saying this, Matthew placed a large brown envelope on the table and spread out the documents it contained. The documents detailed Victoria's secret meetings with a younger man and their actions, meticulously recorded. As evidence, there are also dozens of photos attached. Also, it appears these secret meetings continued even after Victoria secluded herself here. Were you, her parents, not aware? Victoria's parents were left speechless, unable to counter.
With this much evidence, it's hard not to suspect Victoria's infidelity,
the lawyer said with a sigh. Upon receiving the investigator's report, I managed to speak with the man in the photos. He initially denied everything, but after seeing the evidence, he quickly admitted to the relationship. That's a violation of privacy. Victoria cried out in protest. But Matthew's report was relentless.
This man is currently unemployed, a freeloader who depends on women for living expenses. It seems Victoria is not the only woman he's involved with. Victoria! Is this true?
It's all lies. They're making it all up. Matthew brushed off Victoria's protest.
Initially, Victoria used our family's living expenses to send money to this man and buy him expensive gifts. As she was compared to other women, her actions escalated. Unable to cover it with just our living expenses, she resorted to deceiving my mom. What do you have to say for yourself, Victoria? Answer clearly. Shut up. Everything they said is true. I admit to everything.
Victoria yelled, admitting to all the facts.
The money I got from deceiving Kara was sent directly to that man's account.
In contrast to Victoria's panic, Matthew remained composed. Actually, I've also hired a lawyer, and we're moving forward with a divorce and seeking compensation. Hearing this, Victoria's parents panicked.
Matthew, let's retract that divorce talk. Let's forget about the divorce. It would ruin our reputation too much. You don't really want to divorce Victoria, do you?
Exactly. What Victoria did is inexcusable. We understand that. But what about Natalie? What happens to her if her parents divorce over adult issues? Kenneth, Hilda. Do you know how I came to realize Victoria's infidelity? Matthew asked. Victoria's parents looked at each other, but it seemed they couldn't find a clear answer.
Natalie, come here.
At Matthew's call, Natalie, who had been playing next door. What? Dad? Came running over.
Tell everyone here about what you told Dad before.
Then, looking up at Victoria, Natalie said, After Dad and I go to bed, Mom always goes out somewhere. And when I secretly watched from the window, I saw her leaving in a car with a man Dad doesn't know.
Stop it, Natalie. I hate Mom. She's always on the phone when I try to talk to her and never takes me anywhere fun. She didn't even make a lunch for my preschool sports day.
And with clear determination, Natalie declared,
I don't need a mom like that. I love Dad and Grandma. I want to live with Dad and them. That's how it is. You neglected your own child to fool around with another man. Someone like that can't be trusted with our child. I'll take care of Natalie. We're getting a divorce.
Matthew stated firmly. Despite Victoria and her parents' refusal to agree to the divorce, the evidence of infidelity was overwhelming, and the divorce between Matthew and Victoria was eventually finalized. It turned out Victoria was the one who had swapped the real Thanksgiving gift with a box containing an old towel. It's because Natalie was making those video calls with that old woman. I couldn't have time for calls with him. It was annoying. Victoria's motive involved the presence of her affair partner.
Victoria, are you even a mother to your child?
I sighed deeply in disbelief. Both you and that man will pay compensation. It's only fair, as you've deceived not just me but also Mom and Natalie. Wait, please. He doesn't work. Life is already hard enough.
You reap what you sow. Make sure you work and pay up.
Matthew resolutely pushed Victoria away, ensuring she and her affair partner paid the compensation in full. Afterwards, Matthew and Natalie moved into my house.
Yay! Now I can see Grandma every day.
Natalie was overjoyed. It seemed that Matthew had managed to transfer within the same company he was working for. After I explained the situation, my boss was understanding. Thankfully, it all worked out. Suddenly, our home became much livelier, and I started cooking with even more enthusiasm.
Today, Nathan in my class said he likes me. Is that so? That's great. You're popular at school because you're so cute, Natalie. Hey! Like, as in... She's still in elementary school. Isn't that too early for this kind of thing? Why are you so flustered? Be a bit more steady as a father.
As I chided him, Natalie laughed loudly. Regardless, Natalie, now in elementary school, quickly made new friends and seemed to be enjoying her days, which reassured me.
Gathering around the table as a family like this, spending quality time together, it's really something special.
I vowed to protect Natalie's smile.
Standing is common sense for a daughter-in-law.
I had been preparing food and welcoming guests since the morning at a family gathering. Being 9 months pregnant, I was taking a short break on the sofa in the back. When my mother-in-law, Susan, found me sitting, her expression changed drastically as she approached me and snapped those words.
Susan, I'm sorry. I'm just having some discomfort in my stomach.
Unable to stand due to the pain, I apologized while remaining seated on the sofa. As I struggled to get up, Susan, seeming to give up, turned to leave but then shockingly kicked my stomach.
Susan, how could you?
I immediately curled up to protect my stomach, and fortunately, I didn't feel much pain.
It's your useless body that's the problem.
This was a line I was all too familiar with after always being oppressed, but I was left speechless by the shock of being kicked in the stomach. Someone, who had been silently watching this scene, waited until Susan was seated, and then. My name is Anne. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I live happily with my husband Tom and our 3-year-old son. I am currently 9 months pregnant with our second child. Before the pregnancy was confirmed, it was decided that Tom would be transferred to work abroad alone. Although Tom insisted on staying in America, I didn't want him to give up his dream of working overseas, a goal since our dating days. After I encouraged him to the end, he promised to go abroad for just 3 years, and then he left. While I felt joy in supporting my husband's dream, there was one concern. The insidious harassment from Susan and Mike, my father-in-law. While Tom was around, they adored us, but in his absence, they subjected me to daily verbal abuse. Since Susan and Mike were kind in front of Tom, I always tried to bring him along. But for the next 3 years, I'll have to endure their malicious harassment alone, which is disheartening. However, I couldn't discuss it with Tom, knowing it would only add to his worries and considering Susan's feelings towards her son. Initially, I tried to please them by complying with everything, but no matter what, I only faced their resentment.
All I want is to get along with Mike and Susan.
Desiring a peaceful relationship with Susan and Mike, one day, I finally broke down and decided to be submissive. Then I heard shocking words from them.
You stole our precious son from us.
That's what Susan declared.
Ever since you married our son, he hardly pays any attention to us.
I finally understood the root of their relentless harassment. Susan and Mike were so overly fond of their son that they were jealous of me, his wife.
If that's the case, I can always come with him.
Startled by Susan's unexpected confession, I tried to find a solution and offered various suggestions.
The best thing would be for you to leave our son alone.
Right.
Then he might return his love to us.
I was stunned by Susan's wish. The thought of them wanting a divorce because they felt their son's affection for them had diminished gave me chills. And this distorted expression of their love even scared me.
Don't you like the idea of your son building a new family?
I asked tentatively.
New family? That's ridiculous. Our family is enough. No matter how old our son gets.
Realizing the extraordinary love they had for their only son, my husband, I was speechless.
I love my husband. I want to get along with you and Susan, but I have no intention of leaving him.
Normally quiet, this was one point I could not concede. Seeing my resolve, Susan scoffed and retorted.
Are you so confident that no matter how we treat you, you won't leave?
From that day on, their harassment only intensified instead of diminishing. At one point, knowing I was allergic to shrimp, they sneakily added it to the fried food. I was about to eat it when my husband, who always harped on about my allergy, noticed and warned me.
Shrimp? I'm sorry. Actually, this was a gift. I forgot you can't have shrimp.
Susan apologized to me repeatedly, making excuses. My husband seemed satisfied and asked her to be more careful in the future. But even as they spoke, Susan was stepping on my foot under the table. Amidst such harassment, we were leading a peaceful life when my husband's transfer overseas was confirmed. Susan and the others turned pale with shock as I celebrated.
Overseas. That's going to be hard on the child and Anne, right?
My father-in-law, Mike, really just not wanting to be separated from them, used me as an excuse. My husband said it was a decision we made together, and I knew the anger would soon be directed at me.
And, did you even consider my grandchild's feelings?
Unsatisfied with my decision, Susan interrogated me like it was an inquisition. Fed up, my husband finally spoke out.
Both of you, enough. Working abroad has always been my dream. And is just supporting me in that.
He immediately defended me.
We support you too. But now just isn't the right time, is it?
Mike seemed a bit sorry, yet unable to agree.
That's right. The grandchild is only 3 years old. It's too much for Anne.
Susan, for once, seemed to be on my side, using my name in her argument.
I'm fine. Tom and I have discussed it and decided to go for it.
I spoke up, my voice trembling slightly, trying to act bravely so my husband wouldn't worry. Realizing our determination, Susan and Mike reluctantly accepted it, though with a sense of defeat. That night, feeling sorry towards Susan and Mike, my husband suggested we all have dinner together. I had been avoiding eating with them since the shrimp allergy incident, but I decided to endure it for my husband's sake.
Then let us, the ladies, get busy preparing in the kitchen. You relax.
Susan, excited to cook for her son after a long time, went into the kitchen. Hesitant to be alone with her, I steeled myself and followed her to the kitchen.
Aren't you afraid our son might leave you when he returns from abroad?
Susan's words, still hoping for our breakup, drained the blood from my face. Realizing it was pointless to engage, I silently started preparing. While we were working on different ingredients, Susan called out to me.
And that pot over there is cool. Could you take it to the table?
Busy with preparations, I followed Susan's instructions and grabbed the pot handle with my bare hands, only to let go immediately from the scorching heat. A pot of steaming hot beef stew fell right at my feet. I burned my hands and feet. Hearing my scream, my husband and Susan rushed over.
And, did you touch it with your bare hands? I told you to be careful of burns. What should we do now?
Susan pretended to panic, but did nothing. My husband, seeing this, quickly instructed to bring a towel and ice. He also told Mike to call an ambulance. Seeing my red, swollen hands and feet, I could only cry in pain and frustration, clinging to my husband. Thanks to his quick thinking, I received proper treatment at the hospital and was told it would take 2 weeks to heal. Slowly, my spirit was breaking from Susan's escalating insidious bullying. As time passed and my husband's departure overseas approached, I made sure to avoid Susan and the others completely. Despite their vengeful attempts to visit our home or call multiple times a day, I never responded. For their excuses to see their grandchild, I sent pictures with messages. To my husband, I told him the reason for not seeing Susan was because of severe pregnancy symptoms, which he understood. Half a year passed, and the annual family gathering, highly valued by my husband's family, drew near. Knowing its importance, and though my husband said I didn't have to attend, I decided to go. I informed Susan of my attendance in advance through a message. Her reply, seemingly eager to finally vent her frustrations on me, brought back the flashbacks of my burn injury accident and filled me with more fear. Then, the day arrived when everyone was to gather. I briefly greeted Susan and Mike, then spent most of my time with relatives of my age, keeping my distance.
Standing is common sense for a daughter-in-law.
I had been preparing meals and welcoming guests since the morning at the family gathering. Being 9 months pregnant, I took a rest on a sofa in the back. When Susan saw me sitting, she changed her expression and came over to me, throwing those words at me.
Susan, I'm sorry. I'm just having some discomfort in my stomach.
Unable to stand due to the pain, I apologized but couldn't get up from the sofa. Seeing that I couldn't stand, Susan, seeming to give up, turned to leave, but then shockingly, she turned back and kicked my stomach.
Susan, how could you?
I immediately curled up to protect my stomach, and luckily, the pain was minimal.
It's your useless body that's at fault.
I was used to being oppressed by her, but I was left speechless and shocked by being kicked. Someone, who had been silently watching this scene, waited until Susan was seated, and then,
"Mom, what did you just do to Anne on the sofa?"
someone shouted loudly, making everyone, including me, turn towards the voice. There stood my husband, who was supposed to be overseas for work.
"Tom."
Susan uttered his name in a trembling voice. Painfully, I stood up from the sofa and slowly moved towards my husband.
"What did you do to Anne just now?"
he asked Susan, with an expression I had never seen before. "Tom, why are you here?" Until the previous day, my husband had apologized over the phone, saying he couldn't get a long leave and wouldn't be able to attend. I couldn't ask him to accompany me, knowing he had just been transferred overseas. Anne. I came back to surprise everyone. Tom's face softened as he looked at me, his expression changing completely from before. He rushed over to me, hugged me around my shoulders, and supported me.
"But when I came back, I happened to see Mom and you having that interaction from the entrance."
He had been frozen for a while, not understanding the situation as he had never seen Susan like that before.
"I was about to ask and what happened when Mom kicked her."
Hearing this, I realized he had witnessed Susan kicking my stomach. Looking up at my husband, I could see the anger in his eyes.
"Tom, this is..."
Relatives started gathering in the room, sensing the unusual tension, making the situation even more strained.
"Tom, everyone is here, let's talk in the other room."
Susan tried to calm my husband with a quiet voice, attempting to defuse the situation.
"And you don't need to say anything. I want to hear it directly from Mom."
Saying this, my husband turned his face towards Susan again.
"No, let's hear it here, in front of everyone."
The relatives, stunned by my husband's raised voice, watched the unfolding situation in silence. The commotion got Mike and Mike's brother's attention, who had organized the family gathering.
"What's all this commotion about?"
Seeing the unusual situation, Mike hurried to Susan's side. Upon realizing his beloved son was there in front of him, Mike looked even more shocked.
"Dad, it's been a while. I didn't want our reunion to be like this, but I just saw something unbelievable."
With Mike's presence, my husband regained some composure and continued in a calm voice.
"What happened?"
Mike looked slightly uneasy. He already knew Susan had done something to me. Having always turned a blind eye to Susan's bullying, he was part of it too.
"It was just, and I were talking."
Susan stubbornly refused to admit she had kicked me, trying to get out of this situation. However, my husband quietly glared at her, wanting her to confess. Sensing the conversation wasn't progressing, I finally spoke up.
"You kicked me in the stomach, didn't you?"
I finally revealed in front of everyone that Susan had kicked my stomach. Hearing this, the relatives began murmuring.
"And what an accusation! I would never do such a thing."
Susan shouted, flustered.
"Never, what, Mom? I saw it with my own eyes."
My husband expressed his frustration and anger at Susan's denial and her true nature. As he seemed about to confront Susan, I urged him desperately to stay calm.
"Tom, are you sure it wasn't a misunderstanding? Susan doing such a thing."
Mike continued to defend Susan until the end. Hearing this, my husband's suspicion only deepened.
"Dad, even now, you're siding with Mom?"
My husband was speechless at Mike's attitude, seemingly more afraid of Susan facing critical judgment than the fact she had kicked me.
"Tom."
I could only hold his hand tightly. The ease with which his parents dismissed their daughter-in-law raised my husband's suspicions, bringing up a question in his mind.
"Anne, this isn't the first time, is it?"
My husband's intuition seemed to pick up on something from Susan's behavior. Trying not to worry him, I felt both frustrated and relieved that my strongest ally had finally appeared, bringing tears to my eyes. Realizing this wasn't the first incident, my husband asked,
"Mom, what terrible things have you done to Anne?"
his anger not subsiding but intensifying. The relatives intervened to stop Tom as he approached Susan and Mike.
"Tell everyone here what pain you've caused, Anne."
As Susan heard this, her face turned pale. and she collapsed to the ground.
Tom, it's too harsh to treat Susan like this in her condition.
Mike began to show anger towards Tom.
Harsh? Then what about that burn?
Susan and I were shocked, as if our thoughts had paused for a moment. And the one who raised his voice upon hearing this was, surprisingly, Mike's brother.
And was burned?
Mike's brother, who had been quietly observing what he thought was a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issue, spoke up for the first time, surprised by the unexpected development.
It seemed strange to me. That day, and got a severe burn holding a pot of just done beef stew with her bare hands.
My husband had been troubled by the fact that I had done something I would never normally do.
And would always check if it's safe before handling a pot with her bare hands if it were her own decision.
I always had a habit of double-checking everything. Whether it was cooking or leaving the house, which my husband knew well. So, it seemed odd to him that I would grab the pot without thinking.
The beef stew was made by Mom. Did she say something at that time?
As he pressed for answers, Susan and Mike fell silent. Some relatives defended Susan, while others expressed disbelief. I decided to reveal everything.
That time, Susan said it was cool, right?
I repeated Susan's words with courage. I explained how I was busy with my own cooking preparations that day and took Susan's words at face value without checking the pot.
I regret not verifying and ended up getting burned.
I admitted my mistake. Hearing this, Susan's expression changed, and she glared at me, shouting,
"You are just trying to slander us. What kind of daughter-in-law are you?"
Susan, who had been subdued, became enraged when faced with me.
I'm not stupid. I have saved our interactions as evidence.
I had secretly been collecting evidence of Susan and Mike's insidious harassment, in case I couldn't endure it any longer. My husband showed a surprised expression, then I said,
"Tom, I'm sorry I kept quiet. I didn't want to worry you, and I was afraid of ruining your relationship with Susan and Mike."
The root of his parents' harassment stemmed from their affection for their beloved son. It was a twisted love, but I wanted to avoid worsening the relationship between Tom, who had been raised with much love from his parents. Susan and Mike, not expecting that I had been considerate of them, turned pale upon hearing this.
"Mom, Dad, did you hear? Even after all this, and was still thinking of us."
Tom apologized to me, ashamed that he hadn't realized the situation.
"And I'm so sorry my parents made you suffer this much."
Tom apologized with tears, and Susan, as if regretting how things turned out, exclaimed,
"No, it's wrong. It's her fault. She stole our precious son."
It was the moment Susan's true nature was revealed. The relatives around us looked on with cold eyes. Even Mike, considering his brother's reputation, tried to stop Susan's outburst. "Who stole me from you? Are you doing all this too and because of me?" My husband was speechless. Not expecting such a distorted form of love where Susan's harassment was a retaliation for his affection being directed towards his new family.
"I'm grateful for how you raised me. But the most important thing to me now is and our family."
He expressed his feelings to Susan and Mike. He then shared how much respect and consideration we had always shown towards Susan and her family.
"Mom, Dad, I wanted you to see the irreplaceable love of your grandchildren and Anne's admiration for you."
Moved by their son's desperate plea, Susan and Mike seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation, and Mike collapsed on the spot.
"Mom and Dad, you've destroyed your own daughter-in-law's love and my trust with your own hands."
Hearing this, Susan, realizing for the first time that she had disappointed her precious son, broke down in tears. Seeing Susan crying and distraught, a part of me felt sorry for her outburst. But more so, I felt a sense of relief in her taking responsibility for this mess. Mike's brother, changing the dire atmosphere, intervened.
"All right, this isn't a spectacle. The four of you, please move to a quieter room."
With those words, the other relatives awkwardly dispersed. Receiving words of sympathy and encouragement, I began to relax a bit. Supported by my husband's arm, We moved to a quieter room as Mike's brother suggested. Once the four of us were inside, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. My husband still had questions for them, eagerly wanting to confront them. However, Susan and Mike looked so exhausted that he hesitated to speak. Then, Mike's brother entered the room.
Now we can have a calm discussion. Is it true that Anne was subjected to insidious bullying?
With a stern expression, Mike's brother asked directly. After a moment of contemplation, Mike finally nodded in resignation. Triggered by Mike's acknowledgement, my husband burst out.
To think my parents would do this while Anne was protecting our child and unborn baby, it's shameful.
He voiced all the accusations as if speaking on my behalf. He revealed that the shrimp allergy, the burn, and the kicking were all acts of spite towards me.
I can't understand how Dad and Mom could hurt Anne to such an extent.
Disappointed beyond imagination, my husband's disillusionment deepened. Then, Mike's brother brought an end to the discussion.
Tom, that's enough. As your uncle, I'm deeply sorry for such a shameful sibling. I can't forgive what they've done.
He apologized to us, then rushed to Mike and struck him on the cheek.
As your brother, I cannot forgive your actions. Don't show your face at family events anymore.
He then instructed Susan and Mike to leave immediately. Susan and Mike seemed to want to say something to me, but the fact that they had kicked me remained unchanged. I ignored their expressions and stayed close to my husband's side. Once Susan and Mike were out of sight, I finally felt a sense of closure and, perhaps relieved, I broke down crying. I don't remember much about what happened next, but my husband stayed by my side until the end. After the revelation of Susan's insidious bullying, my husband forbade any contact or visits from them. This helped me avoid seeing Susan, and gradually, my emotional wounds began to heal. The overseas transfer that was supposed to last 3 years was cut short by my husband, who didn't want to be away any longer. He returned to America after just 1 year. Initially, I was a bit apprehensive, but I supported his return, prioritizing the safe birth of our second child. Now, we are eagerly awaiting the birth of our second child as a family of 3. Susan still sends daily messages of apology, wanting to mend our relationship. When I express my fear of seeing them, my husband continues to prioritize my feelings. The relatives also talk about how haggard Susan looks now. And the general consensus is that it's their own fault. In a situation where my husband and relatives are on my side, there's not much Susan and Mike can do. So, once our second child is born, I plan to show them the baby. However, I have no intention of repairing the relationship with Susan and Mike. I'm resolved to spend an ordinary life with our family of 4, combining our strengths.
There was a belief that a woman who couldn't have children after 3 years of marriage was useless. This idea is out of touch with modern society. It's a backward way of thinking. Sadly, there are still those who carry the assumption that all women can and will become pregnant and give birth. And there are those who label women who can't as useless. My name is Ashley. I'm a 25-year-old housewife. I am unable to conceive. I have been weak and sickly since childhood with little physical strength. I often missed school. I didn't play with friends much, so I was shy. I had pale skin, was very thin, and didn't talk much. My parents considered me a defective product and despised me. They wished I would die sooner because I was a burden. All their love went to my older sister, Emily, who was 1 year older than me. Emily was healthy, unlike me. She had beautiful rosy cheeks and big, lovely eyes. I also had big eyes, but my thinness made them look sickly. My wealthy parents focused all their attention on pampering Emily. They bought her anything she wanted. I was left behind on family trips due to my illness. Hired housekeepers and nurses mechanically took care of me. I wasn't considered part of the family, so I never received souvenirs. Being treated as defective by my family was hell. I had no friends to talk to and I was lonely. My parents wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible. When I became an adult, they quickly married me off. My parents gave a large sum of money to my husband, Kevin. It was compensation for taking care of a weak, infertile, and defective person like me. Kevin, who was in financial trouble, married me for the substantial financial support. I was a full-time housewife. I was unsure whether Kevin was working or just having fun. However, he always came home late and drunk. Our marriage was based on money from the start, so Kevin never had any affection for me. Be grateful that someone like you, who's useless, even got married. I was repeatedly told the same thing as my parents, that I was useless because I couldn't have children. I still couldn't get pregnant after several years of marriage. However, there was one thing that saved me after getting married. Although Kevin treated me coldly, my father-in-law and brother-in-law and his wife were kind to me. My father-in-law, who'd known me since I married his son at age 20, treated me like his own daughter. My brother-in-law Mike and his wife Maria cared about me, especially Maria, who was worried about me. Ashley, you don't need to be like a doll and do whatever people say. Mike works for a big company and Maria also has a job. She even runs her own interior design office. She's a cheerful and wonderful woman. Maria is also very caring. Knowing that I spent most of my days alone and lonely, she came to check on me. At first, we just had tea and chatted, but eventually she started teaching me various things. Try to get a qualification in something, even if it's just a hobby, she advised me. I told her it was impossible because I hadn't gone to school enough. Seeing that I was down, only able to do basic housework, Maria said, "If you can do basic housework, you can do most things. Learning something new builds confidence." At Maria's suggestion, I started studying for a color certification. I later learned that my father-in-law had consulted with Mike and Maria about me. Ashley tends to underestimate herself. "I wish there was a way to boost her confidence," my father-in-law said. "Introducing her to new areas of study could help," Maria suggested. Mike and my father-in-law agreed with her suggestion. Although my parents used to say that I was weak and slow-witted, I found studying enjoyable. I gained a bit of confidence when I passed a certification exam while studying during my free time. I was happy because I had always thought I couldn't do anything. I wanted to study more and aim for higher levels. However, when I told Kevin, he just scoffed at me. Must be nice to be able to waste time on useless studying. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by his words. Instead, I felt angry. I finally let out the dark feelings I had kept inside. Are those the words something an unemployed person who relies on money from his wife's family should say? Kevin was taken aback by my sarcasm, as I had always been submissive. He got angry at being confronted with the truth. "Shut up. I'm different from a defective product like you. I'm going to make it big," he shouted. I didn't hold back in my response. "You know, they call people like you big mouths." Furious at my defiance, Kevin kicked the wall and stormed out of the room. He probably went out to drink and have fun to blow off some steam. I understood that my parents wanted to get rid of their troublesome daughter, but I wish they had chosen a better partner for me. However, if they had that kind of mentality, they wouldn't have neglected their weak daughter in the first place. Marrying Kevin was a mistake. I ended up married to a loser who used the money from my family to play around. But ironically, it was Kevin's family that broadened my narrow perspective. After that incident, Kevin didn't come home for several days. I knew he was with my sister Emily, but I didn't do anything about it. Emily had divorced her husband and given up custody of her child. My parents still doted on her. That's why they allowed Kevin and Emily's affair to continue. I could clearly see the intentions of my parents, Emily and Kevin. They were probably planning for Kevin to divorce me if Emily got pregnant. My parents would have preferred to fulfill Emily's wishes over caring about me. I knew that one day my sister would steal my husband. I prepared myself for that day, now confident that I could handle it. Sometime later, we all gathered at my father-in-law's house. I regularly visited him, but Kevin hadn't been to his family home in a while. Kevin had a lot of pride and compared himself to his brother. Mike had graduated from a prestigious university and worked for a large company while Kevin was unemployed. Neither my father-in-law nor Mike had ever pointed this out. But Kevin felt inferior on his own. He hadn't done anything about it himself. He took pride in marrying me, a woman from a wealthy family, but my father-in-law didn't care. My father-in-law doted on me, his daughter-in-law, but was strict with Kevin. Kevin constantly praised Maria, Mike's wife, for being excellent. Deep down, he was jealous that his brother had a beautiful and intelligent wife. Maria is amazing. She's successful at work, has children, and is a capable woman. Ashley is just stupid and can't do anything, he said with transparent flattery toward Maria and insults toward me. Maria looked annoyed by his words, but she calmly dismissed Kevin's remarks. Ashley is my sister too. I don't find it amusing when my sister is insulted, Marie replied. Mike nodded in agreement. Kevin, think about yourself before comparing Maria and Ashley, Mike warned. Kevin clicked his tongue dismissively. I felt embarrassed by Kevin's childish behavior. I understood that he felt inferior to his successful brother, but he needed to grow up. My father-in-law looked at Kevin with bitterness. He had treated them equally, but the siblings had turned out so differently. He had sighed about it to me. But today, my father-in-law cleared his throat and scolded Kevin. Aren't you ashamed, Kevin? Relying on Ashley's family money and not working? Ashley is a good wife. If you're a husband, support yourself. Don't you understand something so simple? Kevin's face turned red with anger. Dad, Ashley was useless and dumped on me. That's why I'm just returning the favor, he retorted. Mike answered on behalf of his father. Kevin, I don't want to say this as your brother, but your mind is rotten. Usually calm, Mike's sharp words made Kevin curse and storm out. As I tried to stop him, my father-in-law held me back. I'm sorry, Ashley. I hoped he would become more responsible after getting married, but it seems that's not the case. With their shoulders slumped, Mike and Maria sighed beside my father-in-law. As I quietly bowed my head and tried to leave, Maria stopped me. Don't worry, Ashley. Everything is prepared. I nodded and left my father-in-law's house, returning to the chaotic home where Kevin was raging. The room was a mess, destroyed by Kevin in a fit of anger. As I stared in disbelief at his childish actions, the drunk Kevin raised his voice. I'm divorcing you, the infertile one. I'm going to marry your sister. Kevin laughed, bragging that my parents had already given their consent. So Kevin chose Emily after all, I thought. My parents had always given Emily everything she wanted. Even if it was my husband, they didn't mind. Kevin knew I couldn't have children when he married me. It was convenient for him to use me as a wife. However, Emily wanted Kevin, and my parents condoned their affair. They probably wanted grandchildren now. So they would use Emily's pregnancy as an opportunity for her to marry Kevin. It was something my parents were capable of doing. When Emily divorced before, she gave up custody of her child, saying the child wasn't cute because they weren't attached to her. Emily was the type who loved herself more than her own child. I felt sorry for the child Emily and Kevin would have. Would a child born to such selfish parents be happy, I wondered. Kevin, not understanding my concerns, mocked me, telling me to leave because we were divorcing. I'll pay you alimony, you good-for-nothing. The shameless man didn't even realize that my parents would be the ones providing alimony. I signed the divorce papers, took my essentials, and left the house. Instead of going to my parents' house, I sought refuge at Mike and Maria's. I had been consulting with them about my suspicions about Kevin and Emily's affair. Mike said with a gloomy face, "I wouldn't put it past Kevin." That's when Maria started preparing for the worst-case scenario. Mike and Maria had a young child. When I arrived at their house, their shy child peeked out for a moment before hiding again. He was a cute boy who resembled Maria. According to Mike, his son was extremely shy. Maria, Mike, and I discussed our plans for the future. Maria had already arranged a place for me to live. I would be staying in the company housing of Maria's interior design firm, and I was going to work at Maria's firm. I was anxious about whether I could work, having never worked before. However, Maria assured me with a smile, "Don't worry, Ashley, you can do it." Maria took care of me, and Mike handled the paperwork. I severed ties with my family after the divorce. Mike explained the situation to my former father-in-law and concluded, "Dad, we are cutting ties with Kevin too." My former father-in-law was disheartened but not surprised. He told me to come and visit as usual since Kevin was no longer related to us. That's how I officially divorced and became independent. I received alimony from Kevin and severance money from my parents. I returned the severance money without using a dime. I didn't want to use my parents' money ever again. I started working at Maria's interior design firm. At first, I learned the basics of the job from one of Maria's subordinates. His name was Stephen, a cheerful man around my age. He taught me in between his busy schedule and chatted with me casually. One morning, I was the first to arrive at the office and cleaned it, surprising Stephen. "Wow, the office is spotless." He happily helped me with the cleaning. When I apologized, he tilted his head, puzzled. "I've thought this before, but why do you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong? We're equals. We work together." This was the first time someone told me we were equals. I had always felt inferior because of my weak body and inability to get pregnant. I believed that I was burdening others by living. In reality, the capable Stephen should have been in a higher position. But he laughed it off and said that if we worked together, we were the same. I felt embarrassed by my own self-deprecation, realizing that there were such generous men out there. At that moment, Maria came to work a little early. She looked at Stephen and me, smiling. "Oh, Stephen, did you finally get close to Ashley?" Stephen turned bright red at Maria's words. I didn't understand what she meant until Maria whispered to me, "Stephen wanted to talk to you alone and was waiting for a chance." Stephen blushed and said, "Director, we agreed you wouldn't say that," before leaving for the break room. Maria playfully slapped my shoulder as I stood there, dumbfounded. When I finally understood the situation and blushed, Maria said, "Stephen is such a good guy. It seems like he's liked you since you first came into the office. But I'm divorced and I have a flaw." Maria exchanged glances with Stephen, who had prepared a cafe latte for her. Then she patted my bowed head and confessed a shocking truth. The son Maria and Mike were raising wasn't their biological child. In fact, he was a child of Maria's relative. They had taken him in after his parents died in an accident, so he was essentially adopted. Maria and Mike prioritized raising the child who had lost his parents. My former father-in-law knew about it, but Kevin didn't. That's why I didn't know until now. Maria said while looking at Stephen and me, sipping her cafe latte, with a warm and gentle voice, "When our first son called us Dad and Mom, I cried. Having a biological child doesn't automatically make you a good parent. Even with blood ties, there are parents and children like me who ignore each other. But Maria and Mike's son chose his parents of his own accord. I thought that was far more precious than a forced family based on blood ties alone. I took a sip of the cafe latte Stephen had prepared for me. The warm and sweet scent gently relaxed my heart. About 3 years have passed since then. I married Stephen. We got married about a year after we started dating. When I apologized again for being unable to have children, he got upset with me. "You don't need to apologize, Ashley. Would you be happy if I knelt down and apologized for not being able to have children?" I shook my head and he laughed cheerfully. "It's just a minor issue. Don't bow your head for something you don't need to apologize for." He had no idea how much his words saved me. Even after remarrying, I kept in touch with Maria, Mike, and my former father-in-law. All 3 were happy for my successful marriage, and today we were on a short trip. It was a tourist spot that Maria had once told me was fun when she visited with her family. I was sitting in a chair, waiting for my husband. He said he needed to use the restroom, so I was resting at a nearby tea shop. Then suddenly, I heard a voice from behind. "Ashley?" It was Kevin, my ex-husband. Behind him was my sister, Emily. Emily was still beautiful, but her makeup had gotten heavier. "You're still so gloomy. Traveling alone after the divorce?" Since I hadn't told my parents about the remarriage, Emily thought I was single. As I ignored her, my husband returned. "Sorry, Ashley, the restroom was crowded." My husband looked puzzled at Kevin and Emily. He definitely wanted to ask, "Who are these people?" As I tried to ignore them and urged my husband to leave, Emily mocked me. "You found another man already? Even though you're incompetent and can't have kids?" As Kevin tried to laugh along, my husband spoke up, looking displeased. "I am Ashley's husband, and her name is now Ashley Stevens. By the way, we do have a child." He patted my belly and Kevin turned pale. Emily sneered. "I bet the baby will be disabled." My husband replied in a cold voice. He was probably at the limit of his patience. "Ashley is currently pregnant with her second child. Her older daughter is 2 years old and healthy. Today, we left her with my parents." Kevin turned pale at my husband's words. I myself was shocked when I first got pregnant. I cried out to the doctor at the maternity clinic, told him I shouldn't be able to have children, but the doctor examined my body and declared I could get pregnant. I had been led to believe by my parents that I couldn't have children. I had taken their word for it since they had always said so. However, my body was actually able to conceive normally. When I told my husband about my pregnancy, he was overjoyed. During my marriage with Kevin, I never got pregnant. I wondered why, so I consulted with Maria. Then she sighed, shook her head, and formed a hypothesis. I never tested myself because of my parents' suggestions. Actually, my parents knew I could get pregnant. Kevin knew too and was using contraception. Maria hesitantly muttered to me, "Ashley, there's a possibility that your parents have been deceiving you all along. Probably they didn't want me to have children. They thought it would be a hassle if I, who was frail, gave birth to a child who had disabilities. So they instructed Kevin not to get me pregnant. I remarried and had a healthy baby girl with Stephen. My second child during pregnancy is a boy, and both mother and child are healthy. I had been burdened with an inexplicable sense of guilt due to my terrible parents' scheme. As my husband and I were about to leave, Emily pointed and smirked. I aborted Kevin's child. It was a failure. In other words, she aborted it due to the possibility of disabilities. Kevin desperately begged me, "Please give me one of your children. Otherwise, I'll be kicked out." Emily laughed maliciously. I was about to scream in anger, but my husband stopped me. He looked at Kevin and Emily with disgust and said, "Save your nonsense for when you're in a coffin, you piece of trash." He gave them a sharp glare, then urged me to leave while holding my hand. I also turned my back on Kevin and Emily. sending them a contemptuous look before walking away. I felt like I had seen something incredibly bad for their unborn child. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Caring for my 2-year-old daughter and infant son is difficult, but my husband helps me. As for my ex-husband, Kevin, he was eventually abandoned by Emily. My parents were also kicked out once they were no longer needed. According to my ex-father-in-law and Mike, Kevin is in debt and struggling financially. They turned him away when he came asking for help, dumbfounded by his situation. And my selfish parents and sister Emily also ruined themselves. After divorcing Kevin, Emily indulged in affairs with married men and ultimately met her downfall. She was sued multiple times by her lovers' wives and had to pay alimony. In the process, she gradually lost her fortune and credibility with those around her. Even my parents couldn't stop Emily. Finally, due to Emily's selfishness, they lost all of their assets. Moreover, foolish Emily borrowed money from a shady company and is now being chased by a huge debt. My parents and Emily are homeless, but it's not my concern. They are not my family. They are just blood-related strangers. My precious family consists of my kind husband and 2 beautiful children. It doesn't matter what happened to my parents, Emily and Kevin. As I changed my son's diaper, my husband played with my daughter, laughing. Seeing his smile, I truly felt grateful to have met him. I smiled while watching them, and my husband looked puzzled. "What's wrong, Ashley?" "I'm just so happy to be married to you, Stephen," he playfully replied while patting our daughter. "Well, you're Mrs. Stephen, too." His cheerful laughter made me and our children break into smiles as well.
I don't plan on relying on someone who hasn't even gotten married past 30. Acting all high and mighty with that chump change, I couldn't help but be shocked by the first words directed at me from the woman who was supposed to become my sister-in-law. My brother, with an even more malicious grin, turned to me. "Sis, just go home already. Please don't forget to leave your gift, though." The 2 of them laughed at me together. I felt something close to hatred towards my brother, but the next words he said made me lose even that emotion. "Well, it doesn't really matter if we have your gift or not. All our relatives love me, and they're probably giving us a lot of money. Mom likes me more than you, too, so she might even give me all of her property." "Hey, that makes it sound like you're just using them for money." "Well, it can't be helped. They're a good source of income." I never thought my brother could be such a terrible person. I was foolish for being considerate of these people. Despite it being our first reunion in a long time, my brother hasn't changed a bit since the old days. If anything, his terrible personality has only worsened, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I reached my limit and left the waiting room while the 2 of them laughed together. My name is Emma. I'm 32 years old. I work for a foreign cosmetics company. After graduating from college, I worked for another company, but I was lucky enough to be headhunted by my current company and changed jobs. The people I work with are ambitious, and I work tirelessly every day while receiving constant motivation. As a result, I now hold the position of department head. Ever since I started working at this company, they have recognized my worth. Every day has been enjoyable. Of course, there are times when I struggle with work, but the sense of accomplishment after overcoming those challenges is something I can't experience anywhere else. I've never been one to spend my days thinking about how much fun I'm having every day, especially before going to college. My days were very stifling. I have a younger brother, Nate, who is 5 years younger than me. Ever since Nate was born, my mom has been completely devoted to him. She loves him so much that I became less important to her. As a young child, I couldn't find anything to fill the loneliness of not being cared for by my mom. The more my dad and relatives tried to pay attention to me, the more I missed my mom. On the other hand, Nate was the first boy born in our family in a long time. He was also the type to easily get spoiled by anyone. So before long, our relatives stopped caring about me and only doted on my brother. To make matters worse, I have a strong sense of justice and hate wrongdoing. Not many people find a child who points out problems so cutely. Because of this, I became more and more distant from my relatives. The worst part was Nate's personality. Having been pampered by my mom and relatives, Nate grew into someone who couldn't be satisfied unless he was the center of attention and knew exactly how to behave to get it. You could say he was skillful and good at getting by in life, but you could also say he was manipulative. I couldn't get along well with such a brother. Nate often got into fights, and my mom always defended him. I started to lose my sense of purpose. Not just my mom, but my relatives also started favoring Nate, and I began to feel uncomfortable whenever our family gathered. Seeing me like this, Nate would say, "Why don't you go to the other room, sis?" He had a smiling face, but he was giving me a look that didn't allow any objections. At that time, Nate was in the first grade of elementary school. If something bothered him, he wouldn't hesitate to lie and make me look like the bad guy. I had long lost my position as the older sister. When my brother said that, I had no choice but to leave. But what hurt more than being treated like an intruder by my brother was the way my mother and relatives acted. When my father noticed I was gone and asked, "Where's Emma?" the relatives just shook their heads, and my mother said, "I don't know." Then Nate jumped in. "Speaking of which, the other day," my mother and the relatives listened with great interest to his story, as if I never existed. It was so heartbreaking. Nothing changed, even when I wasn't around. At times like that, only my father's sister, Aunt Ava, worried about me. "Here you are. Don't you want to go back to the others? Or do you not want to?" As I cried quietly, sad and frustrated, my aunt sat down next to me. Without me noticing, she gently stroked my back as I buried my face in her lap. When I couldn't say anything, my aunt began to speak softly. "I kind of understand how you feel, Emma. Maybe it's because I'm an older sister, too. Ever since my brother was born, he was the one who got all the attention. And you know how our relatives are, mostly women, right? So they really spoil the boys. I always thought it was unfair." "You too, Aunt Ava?" I was surprised. My aunt was always cheerful and in charge at family gatherings, and I never would have thought she felt that way. My aunt smiled gently in response to my question. "Yes, when I was a kid, I was so jealous of my brother all the time. But he wasn't very talkative, so he wasn't always the center of attention like Nate. I think you must be feeling much worse than I did." Aunt Ava said this while gently stroking my head. I hadn't had my head patted like this in so long, and I felt a mix of emotions, happiness and embarrassment for letting her see how weak I felt. Our family has strong ties, you know. And Nate is kind of cunning, or maybe he's just good at winning people's hearts. He has that kind of personality, right? Everyone gets easily fooled by him." "Really, Aunt Ava? You think that about Nate too?" I was surprised again, thinking that no one in the family saw my brother that way. Aunt Ava winked at me, surprised. "So don't forget, I'm watching you, Emma. If you want, I can talk to everyone about it." "No, it's okay. Just knowing that you're watching me is enough to make me happy." "All right, I understand. But if there's anything you want me to hear, I'll listen. You can always rely on me." After that, I looked forward to seeing my aunt at family gatherings. Even now that I've moved away, I still keep in touch with her regularly. The only other contact I have is the occasional email from my father with updates. Since I rarely go home, I don't know much about my family and relatives' current situation, so I never expected to get this kind of news from my father. Nate is getting married. Right now, I don't have a partner. One by one, my friends are getting married, and lately, even my coworkers are in a marriage rush. At a time when I was feeling a bit anxious, I got the unexpected news of my younger brother's wedding. Even though I'm not unhappy with my current life, I felt down. Then Nate contacted me, adding insult to injury. Hey sis, long time no see. I'm getting married, and my fiance is already pregnant. Don't worry about not being married and showing our parents her grandchild. I've got that covered. But in return, give us at least $10,000 as a gift. It includes the cost of giving birth. Kids are expensive, you know. My already low excitement to celebrate Nate's wedding dropped to 0. Because of his sense of entitlement, I even considered not attending the wedding. But I convinced myself that this was a once-in-a-lifetime family event and decided to accept Nate's request. On the wedding day, after the ceremony, we were led to a family waiting room to prepare for the reception. I reunited with my mom and relatives after a long time had passed without seeing them. Of course, the topic was all about Nate. I tried to accept it since he was the star of the day, but my past memories kept coming back. That day, the gloomy, cloudy sky seemed like it would rain any moment, and my mood got darker and darker. That's when my dad talked to me. Emma, it's been a while. How's work? Oh, Dad, I'm getting by somehow. I see. So would you consider coming back home more often? My dad said that, but I didn't feel like it. Yeah, I'll come back when work calms down. I need to go to the restroom now. I left the family waiting room. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I thought I had changed a bit, but I see others don't change so easily. As expected, I felt uncomfortable in front of my relatives. I let out a big sigh. At that moment, my phone vibrated. Come to the bride and groom's waiting room right now. It was a message from Nate. What does he want at a time like this? I headed to the bride and groom's waiting room, pondering. Did you bring it? As soon as I arrived, Nate asked me this question. I didn't understand at first, but I realized what he meant from his and his wife's nasty looks. Yeah, I brought the $10,000 gift. Are you satisfied now? Congratulations on your wedding. I reluctantly offered my congratulations, even though my heart wasn't in it. But I immediately regretted being considerate. Only $10,000? I clearly said to give more than that. Isn't it common courtesy to give more than the requested amount? You're as clueless as ever, sis. Wait a minute. Isn't $10,000 already a generous amount? I gave it because you said the baby was coming. Isn't your attitude a bit much? If you choose to act like this, I don't want to be involved with you in the future. As I snapped back, Nate exaggeratedly clicked his tongue. I was really annoyed that despite giving them the $10,000 they asked for, they still complained. As I glared at my brother, his wife standing next to him put her hand on her hip and laughed at me. Don't worry. We don't plan on relying on someone who's still unmarried in her 30s and acting so high and mighty for such a small amount of money. I couldn't help but be shocked by the first words directed at me by the woman who was supposed to be my sister-in-law. Nate also gave me a malicious grin. Yeah, just take your gift and leave. Make sure you leave the gift money. The two of them laughed at me together. I felt a strong hatred for my brother and his wife. But Nate's next words made me lose that feeling. Well, even without your gift, we'll be fine. All our relatives love me. I'm sure they gave us a lot of money. Mom likes me more than you, too. She might even give me her entire fortune. Wait, that makes it sound like you're just using them for money. Well, it's true. That's why we invited fewer friends and more relatives. I never thought my brother could be such a terrible person. I couldn't help but be shocked by Nate and his wife, who seemed to find it amusing that he viewed our relatives and even our mother like that. I was stupid for worrying about them. I was disgusted by my brother, who hadn't changed at all since we were kids and had only gotten worse. Unable to bear it any longer, I left the bride and groom's waiting room as they continued to laugh. Emma! As soon as I left the waiting room, I heard someone call my name. It was my Aunt Ava. Seeing my aunt, I couldn't help but let my feelings show. Auntie, I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving. When I said that, My aunt showed her anger. I heard what just happened. This is unforgivable. Everyone should know about it. But it's true that everyone likes Nate, right? If I say something, I'm sure no one will believe me. It's not like he's forcing our relatives to give them money. So it's just a matter of me putting up with it. It's fine. I don't think I'll ever see them again anyway. Apparently, my aunt had been worried about me looking uncomfortable in the relatives' waiting room and followed me when I left. After she had heard my conversation with Nate and his wife, my aunt suggested telling everyone. But after seeing the two of them laughing and looking down on our entire family and relatives, I had already given up. However, my aunt was filled with anger, contrary to how I felt. You don't have to put up with it anymore, Emma. I never thought Nate would go this far. There's still time. Let's confront them together and reveal everything. If anyone still supports Nate after that, then they can be their source of money or whatever else they want. Encouraged by my aunt's words, I decided to face the situation and returned to the family room with her. Surprisingly, my mother's brother, Uncle John, believed my story right away. Actually, there have been some bad rumors about him at the company. I didn't want to doubt my nephew, and I thought it was natural for the business to have some bad times. But after hearing Emma's story, it all makes sense. I guess I was only considered valuable as long as I was paying him. Uncle John runs a company, and Nate works there. It seems Nate has been taking advantage of his position as the president's nephew and doing whatever he pleases. Because Uncle John is the company's president, our relatives respect him. When he acknowledged my story, everyone started to believe me one by one. There's no way Nate could be like that. My mother, who had been adamant until the end, gradually grew suspicious, not only because of me, but also because my aunt had talked about Nate. My mother, who had been asked for hundreds of thousands of dollars for wedding and childbirth expenses, seemed to have her doubts and eventually accepted our story. My father, who seemed to have believed me from the beginning, was radiating with anger. At that moment, when all the relatives finally listened to me and my aunt, my father spoke up.
I'm sorry for our son. We must have raised him wrong. Let's all go home today. He doesn't deserve to be celebrated.
With those words from my father, my mother and all the relatives decided not to attend the wedding reception. My parents hurriedly left the family room to explain the situation to the other guests. As we waited at the shuttle bus stop, the people who were supposed to attend the wedding started to arrive. At the end of the crowd, I could see my parents. My father gave me a strong nod when he saw me. I'm sure all the guests had decided not to attend. Thank you for believing in me. I tried to convey that to my father, but as I approached him, he was yelling into his cell phone.
Who would celebrate someone like you, who repays kindness with malice?
The person on the phone must be Nate. It was the first time I had seen my father so openly angry.
I heard from Aunt Ava, Nate. It seems you've been calling our family and relatives a bunch of gold diggers. How could you say that after all they've done for you? We have no intention of celebrating you anymore. We're going home today.
My father hung up the phone and apologized to me for all the hard times I had gone through. As soon as we got on the bus, Nate called me.
Emma and Aunt Ava turned everyone against us and spread rumors. Now nobody's left at the venue.
I calmly responded to Nate, who was panicking and raising his voice. Your Aunt Ava heard you guys making fun of the family. She joined in the conversation, so everyone believed us. Can you stop saying I spread rumors? I just told the truth. It's the same thing. What are you going to do about it? And I don't know. We're already on the bus.
Don't say that. Are all of them on the bus too? If so, please convince them to come back with you.
At first, Nate was confident, but now his voice sounds like he's about to cry, realizing the situation is bad. But I didn't feel like forgiving him at all. You just want the gift money, don't you?
That's not my intention.
Either way, we're not coming back, so goodbye. I'll cut ties with you after this.
Wait, sis.
I heard my brother's desperate voice from the phone, but I hung up without caring. After that, cell phones started ringing, one after another on the bus. It must have been my brother and his wife calling, but no one answered the calls from someone who saw their family and relatives as cash cows. In the end, my brother and his wife couldn't get any gift money from the attendees, not just me, our parents and relatives. They seemed to have planned to pay for the wedding with the gift money and ended up in a lot of debt. Not only me, but our parents and relatives were contacted for help, but no one was willing to help Nate anymore. On top of that, they lost contact with the few friends they had invited. The punishment for my brother was far from over. Our uncle fired Nate. He probably couldn't bring himself to defend my brother, who had been performing poorly and had a bad reputation. His wife had already quit her job for marriage, and even though they were in debt, "I'm pregnant!" She didn't seem to want to work. In the end, they had no money, constant fights, and decided to divorce before the baby was born. After giving birth, his wife tried to make money working at night, but her bad personality held her back, and she could barely pay off the debt. My brother couldn't find another job and got stuck in a cycle of borrowing more money to pay off his debts. He seemed to have come back home for help several times, but both our father and mother rejected him. On the other hand, I've been going back to my parents' house more often since Nate's wedding. I've been attending family gatherings, and I don't feel uncomfortable anymore. As a result, I feel like I have more room in my heart and can see things from a much broader perspective. I've become more flexible in dealing with work accidents and requests, and my colleagues, subordinates, and bosses have praised the change in atmosphere. And just the other day, I was invited to dinner by a salesperson from a company we've been dealing with for a while. I feel a little excited about the long-awaited signs of spring.
Building your own home is a huge milestone in life. This is a story about how my marriage collapsed after achieving this dream. I am Adeline, 30 years old. My family includes my 35-year-old husband, Yuri, and our 3-year-old daughter, Sarah. We are going to build a house of our dreams. When I told this to my family, I hoped they would believe in me, that it would be smooth sailing. But that was not the case. That's how it works with other people, maybe, but not me. I have been having endless problems lately with getting the house built, and my in-laws keep getting in the way. It all started to fall apart one day when I left my daughter at my in-laws' house. Yuri and I are always working and barely have any time together during the week. We spend most of our times on the weekend touring properties and consulting with home designers. When we took our daughter with us, she would get bored and become restless, so we always left her with my parents, who lived nearby. One morning, however, they informed me that they could not take care of Sarah because my father was not feeling well and had to go to the hospital. No choice, I thought. We have to cancel our plans for the day. I thought so, but then my husband said to me, "Why don't you just ask my parents to take care of her?" I was honestly concerned that my husband and I were about to have a conflict. To be honest, I don't get along well with my in-laws. My in-laws are the kind of people who think once you're a family, they can treat you however they want. Since when did that become the norm? Besides, I didn't want to impose on them taking care of a 3-year-old child with barely any notice. But if I put off my plans for a day, then progress on the house would be delayed. After much deliberation, I decided to leave my daughter with my in-laws. As soon as I finished my errands, I bought some expensive sweets and souvenirs and headed straight for my in-laws' house. Perhaps because I came bearing gifts, my in-laws were in good spirits and accepted my gifts. We thanked them politely and left, but on the way home, I heard my daughter talking. "I'm going to buy a new house." Then she asked, "Where will Grandma and Grandpa's rooms be in the new house?" Uh-oh. "Sarah, What are you talking about? Did Grandma and Grandpa ask you where their rooms were? And what did you say? I don't know. My daughter looked down at the stuffed penguin she held in her arms like she didn't want to talk anymore. I told her, honey, Grandma and Grandpa aren't coming to live with our family. Maybe Grandma and Grandpa were wondering if we had a room that they could stay in when they came to our house. That must have been the case. She must have gotten confused. Ever since that day, my in-laws began coming to visit more often, even on weeknights and holidays if we were home. My family is currently in a small, old apartment in order to save money to buy a house. Whenever my in-laws drop by, they settle down in the dining room or on the sofa and ask to see the documents of the house that we're building. And before I can stop them, my husband happily pulls out the documents and all the plans and starts explaining them to my in-laws. Why do you have to show them every time they ask? He looked at me in a way that made me feel bad. But then my mother-in-law would keep asking me questions. It was like an interrogation, except it wasn't my husband enduring the crossfire of questions. It was me. My mother-in-law, like the judge shouting out at me on the stand. This drawing shows the location of the kitchen, but it's not very convenient here. Please change it. There are not enough Japanese-style rooms, so please make more. Everyone feels at home in a Japanese-style room when they get older. Besides, one child's room is not enough if you should have another child. What on earth do you think about the declining birth rate? Well, not that last part. Of course, she didn't give a damn about the declining birth rate. She was waiting for my response. Adeline, well, based on the conversations we've already had as a couple, we've already laid down the foundation work with our contractor based on our family's needs. Please understand that it is already too late to change the layout, I replied, somewhat angrily. Then what about the furniture? What about appliances? She asked me in depth. My mother-in-law is a self-proclaimed interior designer. I have many friends, and I have visited many houses and looked at many rooms. With my discerning eye, I can easily tell which rooms are comfortable and which are furnished with good taste. This house, this room is not good at all. Luck is running away, and even work is not going well. It's a disaster. How can you call yourself a professional? You're just a fly buzzing around where you don't belong. My mother-in-law was being so nosy that I jokingly said to her, then shall we make it a two-family house and split the cost 50-50 since you have so much input? But that infuriated her. You want me to give money to our son and daughter-in-law? You're a gold digger. A two-family house. Ha! I've never heard such a thing. That day, my in-laws left early. Go home. Go home. You are not my parents. You are my in-laws, and I don't owe you anything. You act more like my boss than my in-laws. Later that night, after putting our daughter to bed, my husband spoke to me in an exasperated tone. My parents are trying to advise the best they can, so don't be too cold to them. I don't mean to be cold, but they interfere in every detail about our house. They always try to corner us. They think we're their puppets and make fun of us. It's normal. There are parents. You are a parent. Think of how you would feel if it were your daughter. You are a woman who doesn't always show compassion. You need to cool down and think about what you're doing. My husband turned his back on me and would not open his mouth again. Of course, they're parents, your parents, but just because they're your parents doesn't make them a part of our family. It's not like we receive any financial support from them. They don't help us pay the bills, so they don't get an opinion. My husband told me to cool down, but instead of cooling down, I was so angry at his unreasonable attitude that I could hardly sleep that night. Soon after that, the house was finally completed. My family was very excited when we moved in and started living in our new house. But my husband came to me and said, "My parents are moving in with us today, so there should be no problem that they occupy the larger room on the second floor and we can take the smaller one." Wait a minute. What the hell are you talking about? We agreed that one of the rooms on the second floor would be Sarah's. I didn't hear anything about living together. I didn't hear anything about any of this. Besides, your mother might not even like that room. She will. I've already shown them the room, so don't worry. I've already shown them, so don't worry. Your parents saw the room? When? The day before we went to see the house. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. Your parents came to see the house before we did? That's right. They said they wanted to see the house, so I lent them my key. It's okay to look at it. It doesn't hurt anything. My husband said in a tedious manner, as if the conversation was over, and returned to wiring the TV set he was in the middle of installing. It doesn't hurt anything? Oh, yes, it does, and big time, too. I didn't want to see my husband's face, so I left the kitchen unpacked and went upstairs. I closed the door and locked it. I needed to clear my head, which had become a mess of confusion and anger. I was really glad that I had left Sarah at daycare because I had to clean up so much moving stuff. I was thankful for the distraction. I was completely fed up with my husband and in-laws because of their sudden announcement that they were moving in with us. I don't want to be with them even for a second more. However, my husband and I just made a big purchase, a house. I had to stay calm and collected. Think about what you are allowed to say and what you are not allowed to say. For my daughters and my future. I remained in my room thinking about what I should say and waiting for my in-laws to arrive. Just as my husband had said, they arrived in the early afternoon with a truck loaded with their belongings. They should at least welcome us. They have no common sense at all. Oh my God, you haven't even cleaned up the mess yet. You're such a waste of space. After a lot of complaining, my in-laws entered our newly built house as if it was their right to do so. I listened attentively to what was going on upstairs, and then I went out of the room and headed for the front door. I wasn't told that we were going to be living with you too. My first words of resignation were surprisingly cold. My father-in-law, perhaps annoyed by this, was quick to blame me. I told Yuri. It shouldn't be a problem, should it? But it is a problem. It was only this morning that I heard from Yuri that he invited his parents to come live with us, and I have absolutely no intention of living with the two of you, with such rude people. What? Yuri said it's fine. You think you can go against your husband even though you are his wife? Yes, I do. You think I'm a brazen wife, do you? If you don't like it, why don't you just leave? I knew it was no good. I've been thinking this for a long time, but the way of thinking is so different that I can't have a conversation with these people. As I remained silent, thinking about how to fight back, my husband flew in with a panicked look on his face. What are you doing, Adeline? Don't fight with my parents. Fighting? It's not like we are equals. I was being unilaterally abused just because I was his wife. And now my husband is blaming me again? I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yuri, I can't live with your parents. Don't embarrass me. You are my wife, so you're supposed to obey me, your husband. I am a human being before I am your wife. Do you think that you can force me to obey you? My father-in-law, who was listening to our conversation, said, I don't want that kind of wife for you. I don't want that kind of wife in my house, he shouted loudly. Then my husband said, being my wife comes first. If you can't take care of my parents, we might as well get a divorce. I agree with my father. I understand. Then let's get a divorce. I said it loud and clear. Here was my husband initiating a divorce, and I, his wife, was agreeing to it. I prayed that the smartphone in my pocket was recording this exchange. I continued on, inwardly praying. Since we will separate and soon be no more than strangers, then please immediately return $259,778.88 that I loaned Yuri for the construction of the house. What? My in-laws shouted in astonishment. My husband lost his color and looked at me, his face white as a sheet. I explained the situation to my in-laws, who had no idea what was going on, in a very detailed manner. There seems to be some kind of misunderstanding, but Yuri did not pay a penny for the house. This house was built with only my savings. This is because he had no savings at all, as if he had no planning skills. Since we both worked and split the bills equally between us, we agreed to save the remainder in each of our accounts. But this person was wasting money and not putting anything into savings. Oh, come on, Adeline. You can't go there. It's all true. But when it came time to buy a house, he refused to budge. He wanted the house to be in my name. That's why I lent you the money, didn't I? I have an IOU, so you can't pretend it never happened. Oh, no. Leaving my husband and in-laws stunned, I quickly packed my suitcase and overnight bag full of my valuables, clothes, and my daughter's favorite toys. I made sure not to forget my daughter's favorite penguin under my arm. I loaded them into my own Mini Cooper and quickly started the car. I said goodbye to the new house I had known so briefly. Then I picked up my daughter from daycare and headed for my parents' house. My parents were quite surprised to see me show up out of the blue, dressed in sweatpants and carrying a large amount of luggage. If it's too urgent or inconvenient, I can go to a business hotel, I said with reserve. Then my parents hurried to stop me before I could turn around and leave. I thought maybe they were just worried that I would be taking their granddaughter along with me. In fact, the opposite was true. They had sworn to protect me at all costs. Anyway, I told my parents about the situation. I told them that I was leaving my husband, who had not a single good thing to say about me, and that I wanted to take my daughter and raise her. They promised to cooperate with me fully. They also told me to live at home for a while. This was a very generous offer as I was working. I spent that evening compiling and documenting everything that had happened so far with my husband and in-laws. I also saved the audio data of my conversations with my husband and in-laws, which I had recorded on my phone, to my computer and external media. With these in hand, I visited several lawyers' offices, taking full advantage of my paid time and weekends. Finally, I found a lawyer whom I felt I could trust, and I sent him a formal request. I was doing so much that a week passed in the blink of an eye since that day when I ran out of my beautiful new house. When I left the office after work that day, there was someone waiting for me. It was my husband. I would like to say that he was my ex-husband, but unfortunately, until the divorce was settled, he was still my husband for all intents and purposes. I had nothing to say to my husband, but I was afraid that he would get upset and do something to me. So we went into a coffee shop together, looking for a place where we could be seen. I remembered to turn on the recording function on my phone just in case. I asked my husband as calmly as I could, "Is there something you want to talk about?" "Yes, that's it. That house, I'm going to give it to you, Adeline. I'll remove my name from the lease. Can't you just forget about the money?" "I'm sorry, I can't live in that house anymore. Your father and mother stepped into that house before us, didn't they?" "What do you care about such details?" "It does matter to me, so I can't." With that, I took a sip of coffee and took a hard look at my soon-to-be ex-husband. His hair was a mess, with a few strands sticking out. He had stubble on his chin, and his complexion was not good. He was wearing a suit, but his shirt was shabby and looked like it hadn't been ironed or dry cleaned. I didn't know how he was getting on, but he looked tired and worn out. "Please, Adeline, I can't pay back such a large sum of money so easily." "You knew it was a lot of money, didn't you? I suggested that the house could be in both of our names, even though it was my house. My house, you were the one who didn't back down." "I thought I would be more like a landlord, and I didn't know you were serious about the divorce. I thought it was just a threat. I didn't know you would take it so seriously." "I am serious. I don't care if he's just not worth it, but I can't imagine such rude parents sticking together." "Oh no." "Sarah is waiting for me, so if you're done talking, I'll leave." "I'll leave when you're done. I'm going to take care of Sarah." My ex-husband's words made me feel uneasy. I went back to my parents' house and asked them to be careful, not to let anybody take Sarah by force. A few days after my ex-husband's visit, I received a call that a couple who looked like my in-laws at the daycare center were trying to pick up Sarah. I left early and rushed to the daycare center. Fortunately, I had informed the daycare center in advance, so they let my in-laws wait for me in a separate room. They did not let them see Sarah. When I entered the room with my in-laws, I was suddenly yelled at. "Give me back my grandchild, you thieving cat!" "What do you mean by thieving cat? I am not a thief." "If you are not a thief, you are a fraud. If you are not a thief, you are a swindler. Otherwise, there is no way I would have had that much money at your age." "No, all the money I lent to Yuri was my own. It's what I got fair and square. It's a combination of my own money, my parents, and what my grandmother gave me as a gift before she died." "A gift?" "That's right. Every year they deposited the amount of money that would not be subject to tax into an account in my name. That total, the money from the sale of the stock certificates in my name, and my savings that I had been saving, all added up." "We can't believe it was really Adeline's money. You mean you didn't think to make a gift to our son before you died? You can do it now, can't you?" My father-in-law let out a groan and fell silent. My in-laws are showy, vain, and love luxury more than anything else. They are an ordinary working-class family, and since they do not have unearned income, they do not have a lot of savings. It is obvious that he would never have thought of making a gift during his lifetime. I am sorry, but Yuri and I are getting a divorce. I will take Sarah in and raise her myself. Please don't come to the daycare center anymore, as it will be a nuisance. After saying this, I put Sarah in the car and quickly returned to my parents' house. Despite my warnings, Yuri and his parents continued to visit several times after that. Each time I tried to talk to them as calmly as possible to turn them away, but it was not uncommon for them to grab my arm or verbally abuse me. All of this was recorded on my phone. About a month after that day, when I ran out of our new house, I sent a text through my lawyer asking for repayment of the debt and an agreement to the divorce. My ex-husband generally agreed, but he was contentious about custody. However, when I told him that if he contested it, I would charge him alimony for the divorce, he threw a little salt. He became much more calm. After all that, I have a lot of evidence. And they have no savings to pay. It took some time, but I won repayment of the money owed to me by my ex-husband and custody of Sarah, a successful divorce. It took longer than I expected for him to pay it off, though. This is because the sale of our new house did not go as smoothly as I had hoped. At first, I thought Yuri and my in-laws were going to live in the new house, the three of them, but they did not. The reason is simple. Neither my parents-in-law nor my husband could afford the $260,000 that it would cost to purchase the house. My husband had no savings, and even if he had sold his parents' old house, it would not have been enough to pay for the new house. In the end, he put that newly built house on the market for less than he had paid for it, and after several price deductions, he finally found a buyer. The difference from the purchase price and the commission on the sale were borrowed by my husband from the bank. My husband, who had lost the house and was burdened with debt, had to live with his parents in a shabby house. Furthermore, Yuri's sister, who had also divorced, returned to the family with her two sons. The sons were a junior high school student and a high school student. Perhaps it is because 6 adults are crammed into a small, shabby house that they have a reputation in the neighborhood for cursing and yelling at each other every day. The family no longer bothered us. As long as they couldn't pay us enough child support, there was no way the courts would let them see us. 4 years have passed since then, and my daughter, Sarah, is now in the 2nd grade. We now live in a rented room near my parents' house. On days when I come home late, my parents take care of my daughter, and we enjoy spending our days together with the help of my parents. I was thinking that it would be good for the two of us to continue living together, just she and I, without getting remarried, but to my surprise, there is someone I am dating. He is a 36-year-old man who has been divorced and has a 1st-grade daughter. We often see each other when I drop her off and pick her up from daycare, and we start talking. One day he confessed his feelings for me. Recently, we have all been going out on playdates together, the 4 of us with our daughters. The other day, Sarah casually said, "If we were to build a house, it would be nice if all 4 of us had our own rooms and if we could have a dog." My heart was pounding in my chest. The man who had actually proposed to me a while ago. I have my daughter to take care of, and he is waiting for my answer, but my mind is made up. I walked up to Sarah, hugged her, and said, "Yes, I do. I want to build another house. This time, I want to discuss it with the whole family and make it a house where everyone can be happy."
It's been 5 days since our child was born. My husband appeared without any notice and shoved divorce papers in my face.
"If you get too cocky just because you had a kid, I'll divorce you right away. You'd be in trouble if we divorced, right? There's no way you can raise a kid alone, huh?"
Enraged, I snatched the divorce papers from him.
"Huh? It's pointless to try and tear it up. You'll just be my slave anyway."
Ignoring my husband's sneering laugh, I signed the divorce papers and said, "Fine, let's get divorced."
Huh?
My name is Stella. I'm 32 years old. I met my older husband, Leonardo, at work, and we've been married for 4 years.
I'll work hard and earn money, so I want Stella to support me. When we have kids, I want Stella to stay at home.
Leonardo's parents both worked, so he felt lonely during his childhood. That's why he strongly hoped that I would become a stay-at-home mom so our child wouldn't feel the same way. I agreed with Leonardo's opinion and became a stay-at-home mom when we got married. Leonardo, who was over 30 when we got married, wanted to have children right away. I wanted time for just the 2 of us. But I also wanted children. I felt a little lonely, but I convinced myself to save our time as a couple for our old age. But even after 1 year, even after 2 years, no baby came to us. As I turned 30, I started to feel anxious. Leonardo became visibly irritated and started talking as if it was my fault.
Why can't you have a baby even though you're a stay-at-home mom? There are so many working women who get pregnant. You're in a privileged environment and still can't get pregnant. Who do you think you are?
It's not like I don't want to get pregnant, but he talks as if it's all my fault. Having a job or not has nothing to do with pregnancy. Leonardo talks as if it's all my fault. It seemed like he was venting his frustration by ordering me around.
You don't have any kids, and you're just lazing around at home, so you can at least do this. Don't be spoiled.
The household chores Leonardo demanded became more and more advanced. It felt like I was being treated like a maid. However, living far from my hometown, I didn't have any friends nearby. I barely went out, only to buy groceries. I wasn't working, so I hardly had any money to spend freely. I was living a suffocating life. It wasn't just Leonardo who cornered me. 2 years into our marriage, with no pregnancy announcement, his parents started to suspect something and contacted us. His parents asked, "Where's our grandchild?" My husband said, "It's your fault we don't have a baby." I had no one to talk to and had to endure the pressure alone. My life became darker and darker, but the endless days seemed to come to an end. Finally, I got pregnant. A clear positive line appears on the pregnancy test. Tears of joy well up in my eyes. At last, I finally become pregnant. I tried to contain my excitement and take a picture of the pregnancy test to send to Leonardo. Once he knows I'm pregnant, he should go back to being his old self. I send the photo with that hope, but there's no response from Leonardo. When he comes home late at night, he hands me his bag and jacket like always. Nothing seems different. Wait, did he not see the photo? Without saying a word, Leonardo sits on the sofa and starts watching TV. At dinner, he's still silent, so I decide to bring up the topic myself. "Leonardo, I sent you a photo. A baby is coming to us." Holding back the tears that threaten to spill, I smile at Leonardo, but his gaze remains fixed on the TV. Finally, without changing his expression, Leonardo says, "Seems like it." Is that all? Why isn't he happy? Why doesn't he look pleased? I can't understand it at all. An indescribable feeling washes over me. Hey, this is our baby. Aren't you happy? You always said you wanted a child. You wished for it to happen soon, right? I seek agreement from Leonardo as if to dispel my anxiety. He should be happy, delighted, feeling the same as me. That's what I wanted to believe. But the words that came back from Leonardo easily betrayed my expectations.
Don't get all high and mighty just because you got pregnant, all right? Do you even realize how long you kept me waiting? Don't think I'll be kind just because you're pregnant. You're not working. I expect you to keep doing the housework, as you have been.
I never thought of slacking off on housework or expecting kindness. All I want is a single "I'm happy" from Leonardo. My tears of joy from just a moment ago have turned into tears of sadness. Without paying any attention to me, Leonardo heads to the bedroom without saying a word. Why couldn't he be happy for me? He said he wanted a child so badly. At the obstetrician's office, I found out I was pregnant with twins, but Leonardo doesn't show any sign of happiness. Maybe it doesn't feel real yet since my belly isn't getting big. I'm sure he'll gradually realize it as my belly grows. That's what I decided to believe. A few weeks pass, and morning sickness starts, along with constant drowsiness. Even in this state, Leonardo doesn't show concern for my health or help with housework. During a checkup, I'm faced with a shocking truth.
You're at risk for a miscarriage. Please try to rest as much as possible.
Hearing the word miscarriage makes everything go dark. But knowing there's still a chance for the babies, I take a deep breath. The doctor's instruction is bed rest at home. I need Leonardo's help. I contact him right away, but just like when I told him about the pregnancy, there's no response. I tell Leonardo about the checkup when he gets home, but his attitude doesn't change. After struggling for a few days, I decide to go back to my parents' house early. That night, Leonardo throws these words at me.
Don't laze around too much at your parents and gain weight, okay? And remember, you're taking care of the house when you get back. Be careful not to slack off too much.
On the day I go back home, even though we won't see each other for a while, Leonardo leaves the house in the morning. With my parents' help, I get through my time at home, and after several checkups, I'm told there's no more concern. That's the only saving grace. When I contact Leonardo to tell him about the checkup, he picks up the phone and tells me in an annoyed voice,
"Oh, that's good. Well, bye."
Just before he hangs up, I hear a woman's voice on the other end of the phone.
"Leonardo, who are you talking to?"
It didn't sound like a misunderstanding. The person on the other end was clearly calling Leonardo's name. I had a feeling that Leonardo didn't love me anymore. I didn't want to admit it, but after hearing that woman's voice, I couldn't deny it any longer. Now, Leonardo's cold attitude makes sense. As I rubbed my growing belly, I made a decision. I'll divorce him and raise these twins by myself. Having been cooped up at home for about 2 months, I decided to go for a walk. It was a warm, sunny day, and the fresh green leaves were dazzling. Just then, I was suddenly called from behind. It was my childhood friend, Jameson, who had called out to me. We hadn't seen each other in years, and he happily invited me for tea. After reminiscing about old times, we shared updates on our lives. Jameson had become a lawyer and had just opened a small office. Hearing his profession, I had an idea.
Speaking of which, in cases of infidelity, you can claim compensation, right?
I accidentally let that slip, and Jameson's expression turned serious.
What's wrong? If you have any concerns, I'll listen.
Before I knew it, I was revealing my inner thoughts, which I couldn't tell anyone. The struggle to get pregnant, my husband's indifference, and even him enjoying time with his mistress. As I talked, I realized I was tearing up.
It must have been tough.
At Jameson's words, the tension inside me snapped. Even though I'm not young anymore, I broke down crying without caring about others' eyes.
Calm down. It's okay. I'll help you.
Jameson desperately comforted me.
First, let's gather evidence. You can't fight without proof of infidelity.
Evidence?
Anything. Just gather physical evidence.
But can I do it?
Should I introduce you to a private detective agency I'm acquainted with? They're experienced in gathering evidence for divorce cases, so it'll be fine.
Thank you. That would be helpful. After that, I followed Jameson's advice and hired a private detective to gather evidence of Leonardo's infidelity. According to the detective agency, Leonardo had been inviting his mistress to our home and practically living with her while I was away visiting my parents. The mistress was a third-year newcomer at the same company Leonardo and I worked at. Everyone at the company knew that Leonardo was married, as I used to work there too. It seemed that the mistress was having a relationship with him, knowing he was married, and their affair had been going on for 2 years. It was around the time Leonardo became frustrated that we couldn't have a child. He blamed me for not being able to have a child, treated me like a maid, and was indifferent even after I became pregnant. I had many worries because it was my first time, but he was cheating with another woman outside. Learning the truth, I trembled with anger. So this was why he didn't rejoice when I became pregnant. While I was suffering and in pain, he was enjoying himself. Just divorcing him wouldn't be enough. I will definitely make him pay. Determined, I had several meetings with Jameson, the lawyer, and devised a plan. Jameson was very supportive and constantly concerned about my condition. And right on my due date, I gave birth to healthy twins. Leonardo suddenly appeared on the 5th day after the birth when the pain from my wound had subsided.
Hey, long time no see. You got to stay in the hospital for 9 days, huh? What a luxury. It's not like you gave birth by yourself. You were slow to get pregnant, slacked off on housework when you went home, and then had a C-section? You're a failure as a woman.
To say such words to his wife, especially a wife who just gave birth, and he didn't even try to look at the children's faces. I didn't want to think that this man was the father of the twins. Barely containing my anger, Leonardo handed me a piece of paper. His signature was already on the divorce papers.
Don't get cocky just because you had kids, or it's instant divorce. You'd be in trouble if we got divorced, right? If you slack off on housework because you have kids, I won't forgive you.
My husband waved the divorce papers in front of me. My anger reached its peak, and I forcibly snatched the divorce papers from him.
Tearing it up is useless, you know. I can just get another one from the city office.
Ignoring Leonardo's sneering, I took a pen out of my bag.
Fine, let's get a divorce. I've been wanting to do it too. Huh?
I won't let him lay a finger on the children. I want him to disappear from this place as soon as possible. With those thoughts, I signed the divorce papers. Leonardo, sneering at me, reached out to grab the papers.
Do you even know what you're saying? What will you do with these kids if you divorce me? You can't raise them alone. Stop being stubborn. You should just be my slave for the rest of your life.
I've already told my parents that we're getting a divorce. From now on, I'll live with them. I don't need a man who cheats on me.
How long do you think that bravado will last? You can't make it without me. You'll regret it when it's too late.
That's when Jameson's voice was heard.
Excuse me, my name is Mr. Wood, and I'm Stella's lawyer. If you don't let go now, I'll call someone.
Surprised by the sudden appearance of the lawyer, Leonardo immediately let go of the papers.
Who are you? What do you mean, lawyer?
As if to hold Jameson back, my husband stepped forward and raised his voice. But Jameson was unfazed. He must have been through many similar situations before. Jameson calmly continued the conversation.
We already have evidence of your infidelity. If you don't agree to the divorce, we'll proceed with divorce mediation or a lawsuit. If you don't agree to pay compensation or negotiate, we'll also go to court. Wait a minute. I didn't agree to a divorce.
What is he talking about now, after bringing up the divorce himself? I can't stand this ridiculousness. While Jameson was persuading Leonardo, I handed the signed divorce papers to Jameson. "Mr. Wood, please take care of this." Leonardo tried to take it back, but Jameson quickly put the papers in his bag.
"I'll take care of it."
Jameson's face exuded an undeniable aura. Realizing that he couldn't defy the lawyer, Leonardo turned to me.
"Hey, you're joking, right? We're not really getting a divorce, are we? You know you can't make a living without me, right? They're twins. Twins. It'll cost a lot of money. You'll be in trouble without me, right?"
I gave Leonardo a cold stare. Feeling the intensity of my gaze, Leonardo was taken aback for a moment.
"I can't believe you're the one who brought up divorce. And now you're saying this? We're still getting divorced, and I'm taking the alimony. You never planned on doing housework or childcare, right? I know that much. What do you mean, become a slave? Don't make a fool out of women."
I shouted angrily, leaving Leonardo stunned. I pressed on against him.
"From now on, if you have anything to say, go through Mr. Wood. There's no point coming here. I'll ask everyone to keep you out. We have nothing more to discuss. So leave."
Hearing this, Leonardo's face turned red, and he raised his fist.
"What? You?"
But with Jameson's cough, he came to his senses and lowered his powerless fist.
"That's how it is. So please leave."
Jameson's words seemed to make Leonardo give up, and he left the room with slumped shoulders. After that, I asked my parents to submit the divorce papers to the city office. The papers were accepted without issue, and I was finally, officially, divorced. Since that day, I had to change my cell phone because of nonstop calls and messages from Leonardo. Jameson, as a professional, did an excellent job handling the rest. I received proper alimony from Leonardo and his affair partner, so I wouldn't have trouble making ends meet for a while. A few months later, they both left their company. Their affair was exposed at work, and the woman resigned voluntarily. Leonardo was transferred to a rural area, but rumors followed him there, and he had no place to stay. After enduring reduced salary and people's stares, he continued to miss work without notice and was eventually fired for disciplinary reasons. On the other hand, I returned to my parents' house and struggled with childcare every day. It's tough with everything being new, but I'm managing thanks to my parents and Jameson. Actually, Jameson had apparently harbored feelings for me since long ago. He confessed, saying, "I don't mind if you have a child or a divorce history. Please, be with me." He told me to answer when I was ready, but my feelings were already set. After that, I married Jameson. Now he treats the twins as his own children. Neither my parents nor I can thank Jameson enough for his wholehearted support of our family. I can't express my gratitude enough. From now on, I want to build a happy home with Jameson, starting anew.